Thank you very much, Orla. And thanks to everybody that is dialing in this evening during tea time. Very much appreciate your interest in this area. So this evening, we've split it up that I'm going to give a bit of an introduction and background into how we manage our bathing waters in Northern Ireland and what the current water quality is like. I'm then going to hand over to Kathy, who's going to talk a bit about the AFBI work, investigative work that we've been doing when things go wrong. And then Kathy will hand over to Karen to get an update on all the work that Northern Ireland Water has been doing to protect our bathing waters. And then I will finish off with just a few final comments. So just to move on, why do we think this is important at all? Well, we could start at the very top of the tree and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we see that things like bathing water and water quality in general feed into a number of those goals. Life below the water, good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation. So that's a good reason to protect our bathing waters. We also have our programme for government here in Northern Ireland. We don't have a government currently, but we do have a programme for government that all public servants are working towards. And within that, some of the objectives link directly into water quality and like living and working sustainably, number 2 there. Number 4, enjoying long, healthy and active lives. And then up at number 9, that we're a place in Northern Ireland where people want to work and live and to visit. We also recently did or participated in part of a UK-wide ocean literacy survey, and that was really to have a better understanding of how the public, how they understand our seas and oceans. And what they're concerned about. And we had a Northern Ireland specific report as part of that. And in that, 45% expressed concern on the state of our seas. And top seaside activities were walking and dog walking, but then also sea swimming as well came very high up in the order of things that people care about. And of course, we know in Northern Ireland that this all feeds into our tourism offering and to the blue economy. And if it was just making it really simple as well, we've seen an absolute upsurge in sea bathing right the way around our coast, and inland bathing as well. Say a wee bit more about that at the end. And a number of bathing groups, and I'm sure you'll all have heard about that in the press, and people that really care about our water quality. So in terms of how do we manage water quality in Northern Ireland, DAERA, the department that I work for, has recognised for a very long time that we can't deliver water quality alone. We can't deliver water quality improvements. That this is all about partnership working. And to that end, we've had a Better Beaches Forum. It was previously known as a Good Beach Summit and chaired by one of our previous ministers. But it's all about partnership and working together. And you'll see some of our partners there. I've put their logos on the bottom. So we've got AFBI and Northern Ireland Water, who'll be speaking tonight. We've also got Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful. We've got all of our coastal councils are members, because the coastal councils play an important role as bathing water operators at each of our sites. That's the statutory role that they have. In addition, we've had Surfers Against Sewage have been members, though they haven't been in recent years and are looking to rejoin again. And we've also had recent interest from the Royal Yachting Association as well, who want to understand better what we're doing to protect bathing water quality. We have 3 main objectives as a forum that we work to, which are about improving water quality. Again, DAERA leads on that piece. About improving beach cleanliness, facilities management and signage. And those are the key responsibilities of the bathing water operators. Sorry, I should have said the National Trust are in there as well, because they manage 2 of our bathing waters. And also to work together to keep the public and media better informed. And we think that's a critical one, to agree on the messaging that we put out to the public, so that there's not confusion out there. And to deliver these objectives, we have an action plan, and also then produce a report every couple of years on, so that we, which is web published, so that the public can see what we're doing, what the problems have been and what we're actually doing about it. So what you'll all be wanting to know about is what's water quality actually like in Northern Ireland, bathing water quality. This is a slide of our 26 existing identified bathing waters, which stretch right the way around the coast, from Benone, McGilligan up in the northwest, right down to Cranfield in the south. You can see we've got quite good coverage. And within that, then we monitor fecal indicator organisms during our bathing season, which runs from 1st of June through to mid-September. And we have some May monitoring as well, pre-season monitoring as well. And during the season then, though, the results of that, so the two main indicators we look for are E. coli and intestinal enterococci. And those indicator organisms then, which are indicators of fecal contamination, either from humans or from livestock or other animals. And all those results are then published on the web, and those are updated on a weekly basis. Some of you will have also noted that during the season then, there are posters displayed by our bathing water operators on location at bathing water sites. And you can see we have kind of 4 classifications there of excellent, water quality good, satisfactory, and poor. And those are roughly linked to the bathing water standards. It's complicated, but it's to give you an idea of what water quality is like at that time. And when we're calculating compliance overall, it is not done on a single sample basis. It's done on the previous 4 years worth of data. So so the overall compliance is assessed over a 4-year period. And so the 2022 results, which were announced then in December last year, that shows you how we performed at each of those sites, and based on the results from 2019, 2020, 2021 and 2022. And you'll see that there's a lot of blue there. There were our best ever bathing water results with so many sites meeting the excellent conditions. 3 there at good, 1 at sufficient, and unfortunately we had our first failure in many years last year at Ballyhome. So Kathy will say a wee bit more about that in a minute or two. So there we have it. That's it displayed on the map, the same results displayed on the map. And I suppose the million-dollar question is it getting any better? And what I would like to tell you tonight is, yes, it very much is getting better, and we'll go through a few examples here. I just wanted to reflect for a wee moment, if you'll forgive me. As Orla said, I started in this work 30 years ago, and at that point in Northern Ireland, with the exception of Belfast, there was practically no wastewater treatment for coastal discharges around the whole of the coast of Northern Ireland. There was basic screening, and then at Belfast Wastewater Treatment Works, the 2 big works there, we had primary treatment only, and that was it, and that's only 30 years ago. So I'm really pleased to report that over this last 30 years, we have secondary and tertiary treatment right the way around the coast of Northern Ireland, and big upgrades in our sewage infrastructure as well, the collection systems as well. And this is reflected in our bathing water results. So if you think back to how we classify, so the red, where we did get one red result last year, but going right back to the 90s here, you'll see the slide shows the overall classification on the top, then the E. coli and the enterococci classification below. But even just concentrating on that top strip, you'll see there was an awful lot more red historically than we're actually seeing now. And the other thing to note as well is that there's a really good improvement in the overall blue as well, in the excellence standard, and meeting the excellence standard as well. So that, and overall there, meeting excellent 33% in 1997 and 81% there in 2022. So a good news story. I wanted to just look at Helens Bay in particular. This was a site where I was regularly interviewed with water service colleagues at that time on site down on the beach, because this failed every year for many years. It had a holding tank, no treatment at all, a holding tank on a lunar clock right beside the bathing beach. That has all been upgraded and now is full secondary treatment at a new site nearby to Helens Bay. And you can see that in these are the bacterial counts, E. coli on the top layer, and also enterococci on the bottom layer that you can see there. And these are log scales. When we're talking about bacteria, these are log scales. So it mightn't look very dramatic in terms of reduction, but that's because that's log scales. But please note that you'll see not only are the averages coming down, but also the variability is also much reduced when you consider that on log scales. And I'm not a statistician, but we have all our results analysed by one of the AFBI statisticians, and she is reassuring me that this is a really significant trend at this particular site. It's not as good news everywhere else, but at some of the sites we're seeing really significant downward trends in bacteria, which means cleaner bathing waters. So this slide is the E. coli. That's overall between 1997 and 2020, and this is on a monthly basis, and I think you can see there, so you've got May, June figures, July figures, August and September, and you'll see again that these over the years from the 90s through to 2020, you'll see that reduction in the numbers of both E. coli and also the similar patterns on the intestinal enterococci as well. Of course, the one problem with everything that I've talked about so far is that it's retrospective. So all of that I've shown you is us out monitoring bathing water quality by taking samples, and then those samples are taken back to our labs in Lisburn and analysed by our Lisburn staff. And then the results are posted within a week onto the website. But that tells you what the bathing water quality was like yesterday. Now, at our more stable sites, that's good enough. So if you're at Benone or McGilligan or Port Stewart, that's probably good enough. If you're a sea swimmer, you'll know that it's consistently really excellent. But if you're at one of the sites where there is a variability, like Ballyhome or some of our other sites in Newcastle, and you want to know what's happening on a daily basis, then that retrospective sampling is of less value. And that's why a few years ago, back in 2017, we embarked on an EU project specified by our department and the department in the Republic of Ireland, and put together a proposal for bathing water prediction monitoring. And it was really successful. So we developed models for 6 sites, 6 of our most vulnerable sites in Northern Ireland, and you can see them on the map there, and 3 sites in the Republic of Ireland. And models were developed to try and predict bathing water quality at those sites, and to get that information out to the public. So that and it's been so successful actually, and AFBI was one of the partners. So UCD did a lot of the work. We had AFBI in as partners, Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, and the work was so successful that we felt that we couldn't. The project actually finished in December 2020. We felt that we couldn't just leave it there, and so we commissioned AFBI to do further work into this, because it's not easy to do, and we wanted to develop the thinking further. And at that point, I'm really going to hand over to Kathy, who's going to tell you a little bit more about that, about the work which we now call the SWIM NI project, which takes on this prediction work a bit further. So Kathy, over to you.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Claire. So as Claire has introduced, our team here at AFBI Stormont have been working on water quality prediction models for bathing locations in Northern Ireland. And so the follow-on project from the EU Swim project is to develop prediction models for an additional 6 bathing locations in Northern Ireland, and also to assess the performance of the original EU bathing water predictions for the first original 6 locations. We're also developing water quality prediction models for shellfish bed locations in Dundrum, County Down, and in Belfast Lough. But where's this fecal contamination coming from? So microbial source tracking molecular assays have been developed that can distinguish species-specific feces, sorry, a bit of a mouthful, of feces. And our lab here at AFBI Stormont can take a water sample and determine whether the fecal contamination is from humans or ruminants or livestock. So if you move on there, Claire, please. So this table summarizes then the Group A locations, which was the EU swim model locations. And then the Group B locations are the ones that we're developing prediction models for. And the first list then is the list of samples that were submitted by DAERA on a weekly basis from each of these 12 locations over the summer during the bathing season. And then the AFBI Swim NI team were also out during weather events collecting samples to see what effects heavy rainfall, for instance, would have on the bathing water quality. And some of these with with increased concentrations of fecal indicator bacteria were also analysed for MST. And then the summary on the right there is just a snapshot of what Claire has introduced before as well. So as you can see, 8 out of these 12 locations were assessed as having excellent bathing water quality in 2022, which is great. Only 2 of them were poor, or sorry, good, and Newcastle was sufficient. And unfortunately, as Claire had said, Ballyholme fell into the poor category in 2022. So if we move on there then, please. This table just summarizes the samples that we collected in the Swim NI team. So the Group A locations had been studied for a number of years, and we had plenty of historical data of the water micro from those locations. But during heavy rainfall events last year, then we did go out and collect some samples to help validate the model predictions. And then we also were out on a weekly basis collecting samples from the Group B locations and from the shellfish waters. And because we collect shellfish from shellfish beds throughout the year, we've been collecting samples from shellfish waters all over the winter. We're also gathering a lot of data for the model development and training. So we'd be collecting meteorological data such as rainfall, wind speed and direction, and atmospheric pressure and tidal data. All of these factors can affect bathing water quality, and they'll have different impacts at different locations. So there's a lot of data being collected to feed into these models. Thanks, Claire. So just in summary then, most of you will know that common sources of human fecal contamination are combined sewer overflows or septic tanks that have been located close to rivers. Runoff or heavy rainfall can also cause runoff from agricultural fields that have had human or animal waste, such as sewage sludge and chicken litter, or slurry spread on them as fertilizer. But fecal contamination can also come from animals directly accessing rivers, or for instance, horses and dogs defecating on beaches. But it's not just pets or agriculture or humans that can affect bathing water quality. It can also be wild animal feces, such as birds. We get a lot of seabirds at a lot of our bathing locations around the coast, and that can also have an impact on bathing water quality. Thanks, Claire. Now, Castle Rock is a good example of a bathing location, an identified bathing location in Northern Ireland that has consistently excellent bathing water quality. So if I just explain the key to the graph here, then as Claire has said before, E. coli and intestinal enterococci, represented by the green bar and the yellow bar, they're measured in colony forming units of bacteria per 100 mils of water. And the bathing water classification is based on the concentrations of these over 4 years, as Claire has said. And as you can see here at Castle Rock, then the concentrations of them are barely above detectable levels all over the season. But you can see here that on the 12th of September, then there was slightly elevated concentration of fecal indicator bacteria. And then you can see there above that, the blue triangle represents the human microbial source tracking results, and the orange square represents the ruminant fecal marker, and they're measured in gene copies per 100 mils, and that's on the left-hand axis. So as you can see, in a heavy rainfall event on the 12th of the 9th, you got slightly elevated MST, but they're barely above the limit of detection for the assay, and just between 2 and 3 logs. And so generally at an excellent location like Castle Rock, you're seeing a little bit of human and ruminant fecal contamination on occasion, but on most of the samples, there's 20 samples there submitted by DAERA weekly over the season. The majority of them, we couldn't detect any fecal contamination in the water by MST. Thanks, Claire. Then if we look at Newcastle here, then Newcastle was classified as sufficient bathing water quality in 2022. And again, we analysed 20 samples that were submitted by DAERA, but we also tested then 3 samples that were collected by the SWIM NI team on heavy rainfall events, just to see what the picture looked like on those occasions. So if you can see on the, yes, as Claire was pointing there, on the 7th of the 9th, you can see elevated fecal indicator bacteria, and you can also see that the human and the ruminant marker levels both rose on that occasion when there was heavy rainfall. You can see that occasionally here at Ballyholme, or sorry, at Newcastle, we sometimes detected human fecal contamination represented by the blue triangles, on occasion without ruminant, and sometimes the ruminant contamination, which is the orange squares on their own. But on the majority of occasions where there were elevated fecal indicator bacteria, we detected both human and ruminant fecal contamination. And then just if I explain the green dotted line, that represents as a reference point 500 colony forming units of E. coli. And if the E. coli concentrations rise above that, it can lead, if it repeatedly happens, it can lead to a poor classification. And you can see here on these samples that were tested on the 29th of June, you can see that the E. coli concentration did rise above that just fractionally. And we detected both human and ruminant fecal contamination in that sample. Now, if we move on to Ballyholme. So Ballyholme, you can see it's a bit of a different picture here. On the majority of occasions now, you can see that the fecal indicator bacteria concentrations are quite low all over the season. But on the few occasions when it rose above that 500 colony forming units, we get quite a significant spike there on the 17th of August and the 12th of September. Now, of these 20 samples submitted by DAERA and the 3 tested from the SWIM team samples, we usually would detect human fecal contamination at this location. But the majority of those blue triangles you can see are just between 2 and 3 logs, very little fecal contamination in the water at Ballyholme. But on the occasion when you do get the spikes like the 17th of August and the 12th of September, you get quite a large spike of fecal indicator bacteria. And on that occasion, when there was really a very large spike, very heavy rainfall, we also detected quite a large amount of ruminant fecal contamination in the water. And that was probably due to runoff from agricultural fields further up in the catchment. Now, if we just move on, I've got a box and whisker graph here of all of the results for the 12 locations over the 2022 bathing season. I've kept the colours the same as the previous graph. And this just gives an overview of, it's based on a log scale as well, as Clara had said earlier. And it gives you the range of the MST markers over the season, and also the fecal indicator bacteria. Now this is interquartile ranges in the boxes, and then the whiskers are 1.5 times the interquartile range, and the X within the box is the mean. And you can see that for the majority of locations, the mean is no more than 2 logs. And it's the range of markers and fecal indicator bacteria is quite low for the majority of samples. But it's good to see here that the whiskers and the outliers with the dots are what's happening when we get a weather event, and it can be good to see what is different on those occasions. So you can see there for Ballyholme that that whisker there and the mean for the human fecal contamination is significantly higher than the ruminant, but you can see that outlier that Claire was pointing to there of the ruminant was significantly high on that occasion. So at Crawfordsburn and Ballyholme, you know, you're more likely to detect human fecal contamination, but then at more rural locations like Carnlough and Ballycastle, you're maybe more likely to get ruminant fecal contamination. But we need to be really careful here. Not to overinterpret MST results. There was a World Health Organization report in 2018 that cautions against overinterpreting MST results. They're very complex, and ideally we'd be able to say there was a percentage of this fecal contamination and a percentage of that in the water, but that would depend on a number of assumptions which aren't often fully met. So I think they're most useful in getting a baseline of what's normally happening at a particular location, and then seeing how that changes when we have a large weather event. But generally, I think we can say that we've got very good bathing water quality in Northern Ireland. So if we move on to the next. So I'm just summarising here then. The team here at AFBI then made daily water quality predictions available to the public in the 2022 bathing season, and that was assisted by Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, who kindly set up the web page and the app for accessing the web page, and that we also introduced QR codes directing people to this app, so that and these are just predictions for the Group A locations. And then if we move on. And then this summer, we're planning quite a busy summer because we intend to go out and collect samples from all 12 locations during weather events, and then also continue to develop models for the Group B beaches and develop models for the shellfish bed locations. And we're continuing to gather an awful lot of meteorological and tidal data for these models. And then we're also going to carry on tracking the sources of this fecal pollution, and we're hoping to introduce some new species assays this summer and or over the coming year. And we will hope to introduce an avian marker and maybe a pig marker as well. So thank you very much for listening. I'm going to pass you on now to Karen from Northern Ireland Water, and she's got some lovely pictures and videos for us to see. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Kathy. So I'm going to focus on NI Water's investment in sewage infrastructure to improve both the bathing water quality and the marine environment. And I'll also highlight other aspects of NI Water's PC21 strategy, such as the work being done to educate our customers on appropriate disposal of waste. And that's in order to prevent sewage related debris and to keep our sewer systems and bathing waters clear. Next slide, please, Claire. So in the Bangor area, NI Water have invested 15.6 million to upgrade pumping stations and either upgrade or close combined storm overflows and provide additional storm storage. 8.2 million was invested in the first 4 schemes of this package, which are now complete. And completion of both the Carnally Stream and Rathmore Stream unsatisfactory intermittent discharge projects has actually been delayed, and that's due to lands acquisition. So the Belfast Lock UID's work package, which includes Brompton Road Pumping Station, Strickland's Glen Pumping Station and Maxwell Road CSO, completed just last week. So next slide, please. So this photograph shows the construction of the new wastewater pumping station at Brompton Road, which is along the coastal path between Crawfordsburn and Bangor. And the pumping station was fully lowered to ground level, and the area was reinstated and sown largely in grass. So the only visible structure is the control building, which it's been designed to look like an old boathouse with natural stone cladding so that it blends in with the environment. Additional work involved the upgrade of some sections of sewers and the laying of new pipelines to provide a more resilient network for the future. The investment at Brompton Road and Strickland's Glen will reduce the risk of out of sewer flooding and environmental pollution during those periods of heavy rainfall, and it'll further help improve bathing water quality along the North Down coast. So this video shows what both sites will look like once complete. Let you play that, thanks Claire. Okay, next slide, please, Claire. So the ARDS North scheme is an 18 million wastewater improvement project, which is actually almost complete. The modern new wastewater treatment works has been constructed on a greenfield site in Ballywalter. So you can see in the map there, it's just between Mill Isle and Ballywalter. And a number of new pumping stations have been constructed as part of the project. So wastewater flows are now being pumped from the Corridor, Ballywhiskin and Ballywalter areas to the new Ards North works, along with flows from nearby caravan parks. So move on, please, Claire. The new works will treat the wastewater to a high standard before discharging the clean effluent out to sea. And this will be via a new long sea outfall, which is constructed 3 meters below the seabed off the coast at Ballyferris, as shown in this video. So as it said in the video there, the project will ensure that wastewater is treated to a higher standard with resulting environmental benefits, including cleaner beaches and bathing waters. So event duration monitoring, event duration monitoring, otherwise called EDM, is used in CSOs to determine the duration of an overflow event. And we had funding allocated in PC15 for NI Water to deliver EDMs on all CSOs within 2 kilometres of bathing waters. And the slide shows the latest figures for the bathing and shellfish waters. So we now have 156 EDMs installed for the pumping stations, and 92 have been installed for the combined sewer overflows. So we have a total of 248 assets, which now have EDMs installed at bathing and shellfish waters. The EDM data, along with telemetry data, provides real-time information on the performance of NI Water's assets. So it enables risk profiling and monitoring for advanced warning systems. Thanks, Claire. So the aim of the integrated environmental modelling programme is to identify the key sources of pollution that contribute towards the water quality at each bathing water. So that's whether it's from an NI Water asset, agriculture, septic tanks, etc. The IEM models can provide catchment-based solutions to mitigate against pollution risks and bathing water failures. So the models will identify the long-term monitoring strategy for each catchment, and it will feed into advanced warning systems. So the map on the left here shows NI Water's PC21 IEM programme study areas, which are relevant to bathing water protected areas. And PC21 will also see the rollout of instrumentation, such as the examples shown in the photographs. This will allow for the real-time monitoring of the key pollutant indicators in the watercourse. Thanks, Claire. The SABRE project is part of the IEM programme. So while the IEM covers the whole of Northern Ireland, the SABRE project focuses on remediation of bathing and shellfish water areas only. Thanks, Claire. So misconnections. So wrongly connected or misconnected plumbing transports dirty water and sewage straight from our homes and pumps it to our local rivers and beaches. And misconnections occur when a foul water flow is connected in error to a surface water drain. And it can happen whenever new appliances plumbed in, or whenever a property is being extended and renovated or retrofitted. So NI Water have a programme in place to investigate and correct identified misconnections, and that's in line with available funding. And since the start of, since the start of 1718, we've actually investigated over 12,000 properties, and we've rectified 1,015 misconnections. Next slide, please. Part of NI Water's PC21 strategy focuses on customer education. The Keep It Clear campaign continues to highlight the unpleasant impact caused by disposing inappropriate items, such as wet wipes and fat in the sewer. Over the last 10 years, NI Water have actually invested over $1.5 billion in water and wastewater infrastructure. But to be honest, no matter how much we invest, the pipes will still continue to block if people flush wipes and sanitary items and the likes of cotton buds down the toilet. Thanks, Claire. So this photo shows Portrush Harbour wastewater pumping station, which became blocked and damaged by a fatberg in September 2020. So the buildup of fat, oil and grease, and we would call it fog, it solidifies, and when it's combined with other inappropriate items such as wipes, it'll clog up the system. And it took a number of days to dislodge the fatberg and clean it up, and it also cost hundreds of pounds to fix the pumping station. So the stop and think, not in the sink message encourages everyone to dispose of their fog appropriately, and for business owners to ensure that their grease traps are working correctly. Thanks, Claire. So NI Water use radio and TV advertising like this clip to try and get the message out there to our customers. And the video stresses the importance of educating customers and that we can all play an important part in keeping our beaches and bathing waters clean.
Ugh, cotton buds don't belong down here. Neither do all these wipes. And these horrible fatbergs form when people pour food grease down the drain. Yuck. Uh-oh!
Pipe water only carries away pee, poo and toilet paper. Anything else will block your pipes and eventually come back up. Always bag and bin your rubbish. Northern Ireland Water, delivering what matters.
Okay, so thanks for listening, everybody, and I'll hand back to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Karen. I was trying to get my head around all the technical stuff there. So I'm just going to wrap up very quickly here before we have time for questions. I mentioned already that we have we were completing a review of 26 identified bathing waters, all coastal at the moment. And so during 22-23 business year, we've been conducting a review. There's been huge interest in it. I've put the figures up for comparison there. We did, the last review was in 2017, and we had 4 nominations and ended up with 3 additional new sites. So this time we had 175 responses, 350 nominations and 95 sites. And I'm really sorry that tonight I can't tell you the outcome of that, except to say we have 6 or 7 new sites that we would like to bring online, but we're still working our way through the decision-making process at the moment in the absence of ministers. So hopefully watch this space. There should be an announcement by the end of the month or in early April with the results of that. In all the reviews we've ever done, we've always included, we've sought nominations for freshwater sites, but in Northern Ireland to date, we haven't ever been able to complete on a freshwater site. I'll show you, the next slide actually shows one of the first criteria is that a bathing water operator would be nominated. So that's one of the councils would have to take on the responsibilities, the statutory responsibilities of the bathing water operator. So if we can't get that, then we have to exclude the site. Other considerations are obviously, is the site safe? So that involves risk assessments and working with the bathing water operators, primarily around access. So, and some of the likes of White Park Bay, where we know there's a really strong undertow, that's why it won't be identified because it's not a safe bathing beach. Then we have criteria, we have numbers that we've been doing usage surveys during the bathing season last summer to see which of those 350 nominations were the most popular and met those usage criteria. And then again, we're obviously working within limited resources as well. So we have to make sure that they're the most popular sites possible that are identified. So that's kind of where we're at. If we work our way through the decision-making process, then our regulations will have to be amended. The other thing we looked at in that review was actually we had a very strong response from the public about they wanted a wider bathing season, not just June to September. For a change as big as that, we would definitely need ministers so in place to make that. But we're gathering evidence to inform that decision-making process at the moment, and that is ongoing now. So we've been doing bathing water monitoring in the last couple of months out of season then. Okay, so in terms of key messages, just to finish off, you'll see there's loads of information out there. So get informed. If this is an area you want to get into, if you want to get into the sea, there is lots of information out there. I would point to our bathing water profiles, which actually will tell you about past water quality, but they'll also tell you what I've lifted this out of our Ballycastle bathing water profile. They're on the web, they're on the DAERA website, and you can see exactly how many wastewater treatment assets there are, what the historical quality has been like. So get informed and know whether your bathing water is one of those with very stable water quality or one that has more variable water quality. I hope that you've got a flavour tonight that this is not easy. I think when we started out in the UK as a whole on the bathing water prediction piece, that we thought this is great, this is the silver bullet, this is going to tell everybody what quality is like before they get in the water, and this is the way to go. But it's really hard. Every bathing water behaves differently in rainfall events. So the models need to be bespoke, they need to be tried and tested. We need to add more data to keep refining those. And I hope you'll see tonight that between ourselves, AFBI and also Northern Ireland Water, we're really committed to this work about improving our understanding of what is impacting our bathing waters and getting that message out there. So there's another shout out there for the Swim NI website. We hope to do a wee bit more publicity around that this year. Just about the 6 bathing waters that are already where we have predictions for, but they don't always predict correctly as well, is the difficulty with this. But get to know your local bathing water, and you know, you'll get a feel yourself. I would also say then that, you know, there's need to be sensible as well. We know that bathing waters are impacted after really heavy rainfall, so use that information wisely when you're deciding when you go in. If you do find problems, we're totally committed to investigating incidents, and we have the 24/7 365 water pollution hotline run by our colleagues in NIEA, 0800 80 70 60. If you see something you're not happy about, phone the number, and we will have, there were folk actually out today investigating a potential pollution incident at one of our bathing waters today. So that's going on all the time, and very grateful to the staff that respond to that. My last bit there is just about being careful. I was quite concerned to see recently, you know, a kind of a charity swim for next week, actually. And you know what, if you haven't done this before, this is not the time of the year to start, because the seawater is coldest of all at this time of year, and will start to warm up in the next week or two. So say, don't forget about the cold, and you need to be careful in those circumstances as well. And my last slide is just really to thank. You'll see that from that presentation, there's an awful lot of people have input to this. All my colleagues within the division, within Marine and Fisheries Division, who lead on this, but also NIEA colleagues who then do a lot of our pollution investigation work and man the water pollution hotline, and our water quality inspectors. We have our Better Beaches Forum partners, and particularly Kathy then in AFBI and Karen tonight for inputting from AFBI and Northern Ireland Water perspective. Barbara from SciWeb for keeping us all right. Also, you'll have seen I've had lovely photos tonight. I've been getting a few WhatsApps about is there going to be royalties, but to my friends that provided lovely pictures. This is of Fastnet Lighthouse at dawn. One of my good swim buddies won the record, the female record this year for swimming from Fastnet into Baltimore. And so my photographer pals, but then also our swimming group pals as well, who provided lots of good information on that. And I think that really, Orla, that I can hand it back to you now for if there's any questions. I haven't been able to see them because I'm sharing the screen, so I don't know what's awaiting, but I'll stop sharing now and look at what these questions are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks to us all for that talk. It was really interesting, and we do, yes, have a good number of questions now having come in, so I'm going to try and work our way through them. For each, I'm maybe going to try and group some of the questions together if they were sort of slightly similar, and direct through to yourselves. So what do we see? So coming up first here, I think maybe this Claire for yourself, if that's okay. So how frequently, so this is one of the first questions that was asked when you were talking about the sampling that was going on and the results from all the bathing questions. So it was, how frequently do you sample? And if I'll also maybe combine that with another question on sampling, which was, and do you sample for cryptosporidium?
Okay, so during the bathing season, typically we sample on 20 occasions. Now, during our COVID years, that we managed, I think we were the only part of the UK that got a fully compliant bathing water programme, but we didn't do the full 20 samples. So back in 2020, we were only able to collect 5 or 6. We ramped that up in 2021 to 12, and then we did the full 20 last year, but actually had to discount some of the samples because of quality control issues with the filter papers, and that was all to do with lab supplies during COVID. So it's been up until COVID, yeah, 20 every single year, and some, as Kathy said, AFBI would be out as well, but that's typically what we do. So, and in terms of cryptosporidium, no, there's no cryptosporidium sampling. It's part of the bathing waters. It actually, the programme is based on the European directive, on the bathing water directive, obviously transposed into our own regulations in Northern Ireland, and we haven't diverged from that since leaving the EU. So that's what defines what the programme.
Thanks, Claire. And just another one slightly for yourself on the level. So asking in terms of, I know a lot on the presentation there, it was talking about the levels for the E. coli, but what would be the levels for the intestinal enterococci?
Okay.
Maybe Kathy might want to come in on that one.
all defined in our regs. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, and it's different for fresh water than for marine, and it's complex. Some of it's
Claire,
calculated.
I have the EU directive sitting in front of me here. So for the keen questioner here, then, and as Claire has said before, that it's based over results over 4 years, so it's not classified by the results of one sample, but any concentration above 200 colony forming units, if it's the 95th percentile, or 185 colony forming units if it's the 90th percentile for intestinal enterococci for marine waters.
Thank you, that's great. And actually, Kathy, I will, while you're on screen, I will keep you here and sort of group some of the questions that have come in with regard to the MST. So there was certainly a question there in terms of, is there a way to distinguish between the bird and human contamination by bacteriological testing?
Yes, if you consider the MST as bacteriological testing, so not by isolation or culture of E. coli or intestinal cocci, but if we test the bacteria that are present in the water sample, we can determine if it is from a human or a bird. But none of these assays, now we're only working on the avian marker. It's a lot trickier than say the human and the ruminant marker. And we don't currently have an assay that we can do for diagnostic samples for avian, but it can be done, and other labs have done it, and we're working on that ourselves.
Okay. Thank you. And there was some comments in there that obviously we have attendees from across the UK here, and noting as well that MST has been used in Wessex in England there to sort of look at the bathing water downgrading, and sort of asking the view on, you know, how MST has helped, you know, is the routine monitoring and using MST helping in terms of that, I suppose, source of pollution?
Well, I think one of the good things is, I kind of touched on this, a bit of a question for Claire and myself, but we give back the data on human and ruminant MST on routine samples over the bathing season back to DAERA, and then they can share that information with NIW, and that can lead to directing remediation projects, whether it's creating buffer zones and riparian zones so that cattle can't access the river, or to give a gap between runoff when there's heavy rainfall from agricultural fields, or to give NIW an idea of whether sewers are causing a problem or not, and if it's an area that they need to work on to improve overflows or septic tanks or whatever. So we give them the data, and then they put the policies and the procedures and remediation projects in place to help improve the bathing water quality.
Okay, thank you. And Claire, if it's okay now, I'm going to come back to you and pick up. There's been a few questions, I think, here with regard to, I suppose, that review maybe of bathing waters. They had come in before you presented that, but obviously the questions are around now, will there be any development of freshwater inland sites? And is the management of inland sites any different from that of coastal sites?
So as I mentioned, as part of the review, we did get quite a few nominations this time, many more than in previous years, for some freshwater sites in Lough Neagh, Lough Erne, Gorchin, Castlewellan, Camla, so different sites. We only one of those sites has got through to the this final stage that we're at the moment, where we have a bathing water operator that is really keen to progress with this. But there are still some issues around that particular site and around the signage that's actually there at the moment, and the current usage in terms of jet skis and that sort of thing. So we're actually working through that with the council to see, because those things obviously don't, a bathing water site and a jet ski access point do not match. So that's obviously can't say exactly where it is at the moment, but yeah, we've always considered them. But I suppose in Northern Ireland, people are so close to the sea that a lot will go to the sea. Though having said that, I am aware that there are freshwater swimming sites, popular freshwater swimming sites in Northern Ireland now that there wasn't at the last review. So watch this space. The management, the standards are slightly different in freshwater. I suppose the management in terms of it's all about catchment management. The investigations that we'll do will be similar. There's obviously a blue-green algae issue that we would get, particularly in our more nutrient-rich lakes. So yeah, there will be different management challenges within for freshwater sites, but the concept of catchment management will be the same.
Thank you. There was actually a question there as well asking about the sampling for nutrient removal but I suppose that would link through, as you say, to maybe some more freshwater sites and blue-green algae issues.
Typically our nutrient monitoring is done through different programs, more through our Water Framework Directive programs, and is boat-based. So it's a kind of a different lens on water quality. You know, the bathing waters is very specific. The regulations coming from the directive are very much around fecal indicator organisms. And obviously in freshwater, blue-green algae is included in there too.
Yeah, thank you. And just there's a question as well on which I can't remember if it was covered there in terms of the minimum criteria when you're looking for that bathing water users for designating sites.
Okay, that's a real hot potato. We consulted on that in a review back in 2006, where we the criteria that we proposed at that point were 100 on the beach or on the waterfront, with 45 in the water. Now, typically, you're only going to get that on a really on a lovely day, or certainly back in 2006, that was the case. And we based that 100 on the shore on the basis of some survey work that we did about, well, would you consider going in the water if it was a really nice day and that sort of thing. We've stuck with that. We've stuck with those criteria, and it kind of has given us, it's felt about right in terms of getting the 6 or 7 sites that we're talking about now, that they would be the most popular sites. Some of this, my last slides there, one of those was actually Donaghadee Harbour on Christmas Eve, you know, and you'll see there's 45 in that shot, and it was a very sunny day, very cold sunny day. But again, you know, there's sites there where you will actually, you know, just driving up, you will see at high water, certainly at Donaghadee, you'll see big numbers of people in the chunky dunkers, as they're called. So the chunky dunkers will be in, and we have lots of swimming groups that got right the way around the coast and also inland as well. So 45 in the water over the period of a couple of hours. Feels about right. Though, yeah, maybe the next time around we need to look at, is that about right?
Okay, thank you. And maybe now I'll maybe switch to Claire, give your voice a bit of a rest, or for Kathy, give your voice a bit of a rest, because I note here there's some other ones coming in on the MST. So question, is there development of a MST prediction model? I think really, I suppose, generally sort of as well, you know, are you planning to develop the models for all of the identified locations in Northern Ireland, and how sort of do models, classification and MST link together?
Well, they are 3 separate things. So we start with the classification, and that's based on the fecal indicator bacteria, E. coli and intestinal cocci, enterococci. And that can suggest, you know, the results of that, and it leads to the classification, and the classifications can suggest which locations we need to look at first. So DAERA and UCD and AFBI on the original EU Swim project focused on locations that they thought would need modelling. And then we added the next 6 beaches, which we're looking at the moment. But ideally, we'd have a model for every location. But it's best, I suppose, to have a model for locations with more variable fecal indicator bacteria concentrations. But the model only gives, the classification is going to give you excellent, sufficient, good, poor classifications. The model's only going to give you, is it safe to swim or is it not, a pass or fail, an excellent or a poor. So that's the difference between them. And then the MST is based on bacterial concentration, but specific fecal markers for human or ruminant, which is what we're looking at the moment. And they will be similar. They will give similar results to the overall bacterial count, which is, you know, they'll give good correlation with fecal indicator bacteria concentrations, but they can just then help direct which beaches we need to investigate more. So they're kind of all related, but they're not all doing the same thing. I don't know if that answers it or not.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And we do have quite a few questions, so I'll maybe try and do what this time. I'm going to maybe direct. Karen's is getting off there very lightly. So we did have a question that came in around what can we do to educate farmers, and I know you actually mentioned some of that, Kathy, around and what can they do around the riparian strips and stuff like that. So maybe I'll actually just go back to Karen, and in terms of, you showed in your presentation some of the impacts on the likes of the sewer related litter and stuff like that. So, and I know you showed the video that Northern Ireland Water has done. What else is Northern Ireland Water doing to try and educate the public then in relation to the appropriate use of sewers?
Yeah, well, education is something that I feel really passionate about. I think it's so important to spread the message, and we actually have a really fantastic education program which focuses on school children, and we use this to deliver like the Keep It Clear campaigns, and it's kind of hoped that the children will enthusiastically take the message home and, you know, tell the rest of their family. But we also have environmental champions throughout the business, of which I'm actually one. And we would go out, we would support the education team, and we would also attend events and exhibitions and site tours, and, you know, just explain about, you know, what not to flush down the toilet and the impact of, you know, the SRD. So yeah, education is key, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I know also on your presentation there, you were showing a lot of the instrumentation. Certainly have a question here as well. And this is maybe for maybe yourself and Kathy or whatever, in terms of about using new innovations in data collection and potentially online monitoring of, I suppose, or real-time monitoring equipment and stuff like that. I don't know if you would have any thoughts on, you know, is Northern Ireland Water looking at that, or other areas looking at that?
Yeah, well, I would say in terms of our EDM data, we're working closely with the regulator to try and decide the best way to deal with all of that data and present it. So I don't know if Kathy, you wanted to say anything?
Well, I'm just going to add that at AFBI, some of our water quality teams have looked at various sondes and lab in a box type things that can automatically monitor water quality, and some of them claim to be able to detect the E. coli in real time based on tryptophan sensors and things like that, but some of them haven't maybe been fully validated. But certainly we at AFBI have looked into various sondes and new novel equipment. I think a team at New Forge are currently assessing some new piece of equipment that can do some basically for environmental point of care testing, you know, out in the field. So that is kind of ongoing, but we don't, you know, you can't currently improve on culturing of bacteria in a lab under, you know, accredited conditions. So that's still what we need to do for classification.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're now at our time, so apologies if we haven't managed to quite get through all the questions. I think that shows the level of interest that we've had this evening in your presentation, and very much thank you very much from the CIWEM Northern Ireland Committee for offering to host to present this webinar. It has been really interesting. And thanks as well to Barbara at CIWEM headquarters, who has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the technology behind that and getting everything set up for tonight. So I'd just like to thank you all our participants for attending tonight. And certainly we hope you can see this then recordings afterwards. And thank you to our speakers, Claire, Karen and Kathy, very much for a great presentation, very much enjoyed. And we hope we'll see you all at our next event, either next week on the 2 days that we're in around Belfast for our CIWEM chartership and coffee afternoon, and if not, perhaps then at our further webinars in April and May. So thank you very much, everyone, and good evening.